World War II is remembered as the deadliest conflict in human history, a war of massive armies, unstoppable machines, and titanic clashes between nations. But beneath the grand sweep of history lies a chilling truth. The outcome was never guaranteed. Victory and defeat often balanced on a knife's edge, and small changes could have altered the world we live in today. What if Britain had fallen in 1940? What if Hitler had captured Moscow before winter froze his armies? What if Japan had sunk American aircraft carriers at Pearl Harbor? What if D-Day had failed, or if Germany had won the race for the atomic bomb? Each of these moments was a turning point where the war might have ended differently, where a single decision, a shift in weather, or even sheer chance could have rewritten history. The Allies might have lost, the Axis might have triumphed, and the modern world as we know it might never have existed. In this video we'll explore 7 times World War II almost ended differently. From the skies over Britain to the beaches of Normandy, from the frozen streets of Stalingrad to the waters of the Pacific, these episodes reveal just how fragile victory was, and how easily history could have taken another path. The story of World War II is not just one of destiny fulfilled. It is a story of narrow escapes, missed opportunities, and critical turning points that could have ended in disaster. And perhaps the greatest lesson is this: the fate of millions often hinges not on inevitability, but on the smallest of moments. In the summer of 1940, the world watched as Nazi Germany seemed unstoppable. France had fallen, and Britain stood alone. Hitler expected the island nation to crumble quickly under pressure. His plan, Operation Sea Lion, depended on destroying the Royal Air Force rave, so German troops could cross the English Channel unchallenged. The Luftwaffe unleashed wave after wave of bombers, targeting airfields, radar stations, and eventually cities. The skies over southern England became a deadly arena where the future of the war was decided. Britain's survival depended on a thin line of young pilots, outnumbered and exhausted but fighting with everything they had. Here, chance and leadership mattered. British radar, a new technology, gave crucial early warnings. Fighter Command, led by Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, used limited resources with precision. And Prime Minister Winston Churchill's defiant words, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few," rallied national morale. The turning point came when Germany shifted its focus from airfields to bombing London. It was meant to break British spirit but gave the RAF precious time to recover. By October, the Luftwaffe had failed. Operation Sea Lion was postponed indefinitely. But what if Britain had fallen? A successful Luftwaffe campaign might have opened the door to invasion. With Britain out of the war, Germany could have secured Western Europe and focused entirely on the Soviet Union. The United States would have lost a vital ally and staging ground for D-Day. The war's entire trajectory might have changed. The Battle of Britain showed that one nation's resilience and a handful of crucial decisions prevented Hitler from winning the war before it had truly begun. On June 22, 1941, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in history. Over 3 million German soldiers poured across the Soviet border, backed by tanks, aircraft, and artillery. For the Nazis, this was a war of conquest and annihilation. Hitler believed the Soviet Union would collapse in just a few months. At first, it seemed he might be right. German armies advanced at lightning speed, capturing vast swathes of territory and encircling entire Soviet divisions. By autumn, they stood at the gates of Moscow. The Soviet Union appeared on the brink of collapse. But then, cracks began to appear. The invasion had been delayed by Hitler's diversion to the Balkans, costing valuable weeks. Supply lines stretched thin across the vast Russian plains. Soviet resilience proved far greater than expected, with factories relocated east of the Urals and new armies raised. Finally, the brutal Russian winter arrived, and German troops, unprepared for the freezing cold, faltered. The Soviets counterattacked in December 1941, driving the Germans back from Moscow. Barbarossa had failed. Instead of quick victory, Germany was now locked in a grinding two-front war it could never win. But what if Hitler had captured Moscow? Many historians believe the Soviet government might have collapsed, or at least been thrown into chaos. German control of Moscow's rail network could have crippled Soviet logistics. Without the Soviet Union holding the Eastern Front, Germany might have been free to focus entirely on defeating Britain, and perhaps deterring the United States. Operation Barbarossa was more than a failed invasion. It was the moment when Hitler's ambition outstripped his grasp. On the morning of December 7th, 1941, Japanese planes roared over the US naval base at Pearl Harbor. Within hours, battleships lay burning, aircraft were destroyed, and thousands were dead. President Franklin Roosevelt would call it a date which will live in infamy. The attack shocked America into war, but it could have been far worse. Japan's goal was to cripple the US Pacific Fleet long enough to seize territory across Asia and the Pacific. Their strike sank or damaged 8 battleships and destroyed hundreds of planes. But in a twist of fate, the US aircraft carriers, the true backbone of naval warfare, were not in port that day. Nor did Japan destroy vital fuel depots and repair facilities, which meant the fleet could recover far more quickly than expected. The attack united the American people in outrage and determination. Overnight, isolationist sentiment evaporated. The US declared war on Japan, and Germany soon declared war on the United States. What had been a distant conflict became a global war with America fully engaged. But what if Japan had succeeded completely? If American carriers had been sunk at Pearl Harbor, or if the fuel reserves and repair docks had been destroyed, the US Pacific Fleet might have been crippled for years. Japan could have gained uncontested dominance in the Pacific, potentially threatening Hawaii, Australia, and beyond. A delayed American response might have changed the balance of the entire war. Instead, Pearl Harbor became a rallying cry. The United States entered the conflict with overwhelming industrial might and manpower, eventually tipping the scales against both Japan and Germany. The attack was a tactical success for Tokyo, but a strategic blunder, one that ensured Japan would face an enemy it could never defeat. Just 6 months after Pearl Harbor, the balance of power in the Pacific hung by a thread. In June 1942, Japan launched an ambitious plan to lure the weakened US Pacific Fleet into a trap at a tiny atoll called Midway. Their goal? Destroy America's carriers once and for all, securing total dominance of the Pacific. But US codebreakers had cracked parts of Japan's naval communications. Admiral Chester Nimitz knew the attack was coming and prepared an ambush of his own. When the Japanese fleet arrived, expecting surprise, they instead found American carriers lying in wait. The battle raged for days, but one pivotal moment changed everything. US dive bombers caught the Japanese carriers at their most vulnerable, decks crowded with refueling aircraft and munitions. In minutes, 3 Japanese carriers were ablaze. A 4th was sunk soon after. Japan lost the core of its naval air power in a single stroke. The victory was decisive. Japan's navy never recovered from the loss of its carriers and experienced pilots. Midway shifted the momentum of the Pacific War, proving that Japan could be beaten and giving the Allies the strategic initiative. But what if Japan had won? If their trap had succeeded, the US might have lost its carriers, the true backbone of its naval strength. With the Pacific Fleet crippled, Japan could have expanded its empire unchecked, threatening Hawaii, Australia, and critical supply routes. American morale, already shaken by Pearl Harbor, might have collapsed under such a defeat. Instead, Midway was the turning point that set the Allies on the path to victory in the Pacific. A battle decided in minutes changed the entire course of the war. By the summer of 1942, Hitler believed victory in the East was within reach. His armies had driven deep into Soviet territory, and his eyes turned to the city of Stalingrad, a vital industrial hub on the Volga River, and a symbolic prize that bore Stalin's name. Capturing it would cut Soviet supply lines and deliver a crushing blow to morale. The battle became one of the bloodiest in history. Street by street, building by building, German and Soviet soldiers fought in brutal close-quarters combat. Civilians were trapped in the ruins, enduring starvation, shelling, and slaughter. Hitler ordered his forces to take the city at all costs. Stalin commanded his defenders to hold it at any price. As winter closed in, the tide turned. The Soviets launched Operation Uranus, a massive counter-offensive that encircled the German Sixth Army inside the city. Supplies dwindled, the cold intensified, and Hitler refused to allow retreat. By February 1943, the once mighty German army at Stalingrad surrendered. It was the first major defeat for Hitler on land, and the beginning of Germany's long retreat on the Eastern Front. But what if Stalingrad had fallen? If the Germans had captured the city and broken through to the oil-rich Caucasus, the Soviet war effort could have collapsed. Losing Stalingrad might have shattered Soviet morale and cut vital supply lines. Hitler could have consolidated his eastern conquests and focused on other fronts. Instead, Stalingrad became the graveyard of Nazi ambitions. Over 2 million people were killed, wounded, or captured in the battle. The Soviet victory marked the turning of the tide in the east. From then on, the Red Army would push relentlessly westward, driving Germany toward ultimate defeat. Stalingrad was not just a battle for a city, it was a battle for the fate of the war. And history shows how close it came to ending very differently. By mid-1944, the Allies knew they had to open a Western front in Europe. The Soviet Union was bearing the brunt of the fight against Nazi Germany, and a decisive invasion of France was needed to break Hitler's hold on the continent. That invasion, D-Day, June 6, 1944, would become one of the most daring and risky operations of the entire war. Success was far from guaranteed. More than 150,000 Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy under heavy fire, supported by thousands of ships and planes. The plan relied on secrecy, weather, and timing. A massive deception campaign, Operation Fortitude, convinced Hitler that the real invasion would land at Calais, not Normandy. Stormy seas nearly delayed the attack, and even the slightest slip in coordination could have ended in catastrophe. The first wave suffered terrible losses, especially at Omaha Beach, where American troops faced deadly machine gun fire and near impossible odds. Yet, through determination and sheer numbers, the Allies broke through German defences and established a foothold in France. Within weeks they had pushed inland, liberating Paris by the end of summer. But what if D-Day had failed? If the Germans had reinforced Normandy, or if Hitler had not hesitated to deploy his armoured divisions, the invasion might have been crushed. A failed landing would have delayed a Western front for months, perhaps years. The Soviet Union, already straining under enormous losses, might have faced Germany alone much longer. The war in Europe could have dragged on into the late 1940s, or ended with a negotiated peace far more favourable to Hitler. Instead, D-Day was the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. The Allies had established the path to victory and Hitler's days were numbered. But the razor-thin margin for success shows just how easily the war could have taken another course. By 1945, the Allies had battered Germany and pushed Japan to the brink. But the war showed no signs of ending quickly. Then came a weapon unlike any the world had ever seen: the atomic bomb. The United States, through the top-secret Manhattan Project, succeeded in developing nuclear weapons before Germany or Japan. When Hiroshima and Nagasaki were bombed in August 1945, the world entered the atomic age, and the war came to a sudden, terrifying close. But this outcome was not guaranteed. For years, scientists feared Nazi Germany was ahead in the race. Germany had top physicists, including Werner Heisenberg, and early access to nuclear research. If resources and priorities had aligned differently, Hitler could have pursued a bomb of his own. Meanwhile, Japan had also experimented with nuclear research, though on a smaller scale. The Manhattan Project itself was a gamble. It required billions of dollars, secrecy across multiple states, and breakthroughs in physics and engineering. If the project had failed, the US might have faced the nightmare of invading Japan directly, an operation projected to cost millions of lives. But what if Germany or Japan had gotten there first? A Nazi atomic bomb dropped on London or Moscow could have forced a peace on Hitler's terms, securing his empire in Europe. A Japanese bomb used against the US fleet could have shifted the balance in the Pacific. The entire shape of the modern world might have been defined by authoritarian victors armed with nuclear weapons. Instead, the Allies won the race. The atomic bomb ended the war, but also began the Cold War, as the Soviet Union rushed to develop its own nuclear arsenal. The race for the bomb didn't just decide World War II, it decided the fate of the 20th century. World War II is often remembered as a story of inevitable Allied victory, of courage, industry, and determination triumphing over tyranny. But as we've seen, history was never guaranteed. The war could have ended very differently at many moments. These 7 turning points reveal just how fragile victory was, and how easily the war could have ended differently. Millions of lives and the future of entire nations often depended on weather, timing, deception, or sheer human resilience. The lesson is sobering. History is not inevitable. It is shaped by decisions, by mistakes, and by the courage of those who refuse to give in when the odds are stacked against them. World War II reminds us that the world we know today was carved from moments of chance and choice, where one misstep could have led to a very different outcome. The war did not just decide the fate of its own generation, it decided the shape of the modern world, and in each turning point we see how thin the line truly was between victory and defeat,